Hi everybody, Stephen here from Midland Property Investments, and today I have with me Martin Skinner from Inspired Assets. Now Martin and his team are known for creating micro luxury apartments, and to date they have nearly £500 million GDP in total. So thank you very much, Martin.
You're very welcome.
Okay. So Martin, thank you for your time and inviting me to your fantastic offices in Mayfair. It's an honour and a privilege. I've been following what you've been doing for the last few years, and I'm absolutely amazed with your story and the numbers with what you're working right now. So for the benefit of the audience who may not know you, may not know too much about you, should we go back how you all started? How it all started for you? I know after university you started a small business, is that correct?
I started a little web design business.
Oh, see, okay,
yeah,
right.
Yeah. I was a tech guy,
okay.
IT guy.
Oh, right, okay. You and me both then, okay. And what year was that round about?
That was around 2000.
Okay.
The same year I graduated.
Oh, right, straight away, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
I ran that for a year, sold it to a bigger IT company.
Okay.
Based in Canary Wharf.
Oh, right, okay.
And I moved from southwest London, where I was at university,
yeah,
to where they had their office.
Okay, right.
And then I needed to either rent
yeah,
or buy somewhere to live.
Yeah, okay.
And I hadn't had a mortgageable salary.
Right, okay.
That. So that was the first real opportunity I had to buy.
Oh, I see, okay. I think a lot of people can relate to that, especially in London as well, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't have a huge salary.
Okay.
But I was able to get a mortgage.
Okay.
And I didn't want to just swap rent for a mortgage.
Right.
So I looked to find a way to bring in tenants that would pay the mortgage.
Okay, so a bit of a mini HMO or things like that, yeah?
Yeah, I ended up with an HMO before HMO licensing came in. So it was what I called a professional house share.
Okay, cool, cool, okay.
But the other reason for doing that was that I was a consumer guy, not a real estate guy.
Right.
And I basically researched what my young professional customers could afford.
Okay.
I researched other things as well, but this was by far the most significant factor.
Right, okay.
And in 2002, about 95% of the working population of London could afford about £500 a month for their housing costs.
Right, okay.
So it was very clear to me that the vast majority of the population couldn't afford the product that the entire development market was producing.
Oh, I see, okay.
Industry.
Right, okay.
So my simple solution was, well, I'll make smaller private units that are affordable to the 90-95%.
Okay.
And then we would have shared spaces as well.
Okay.
So they could still socialise.
Right, okay.
And that way we could soak up the 90-95% of the market.
Oh, brilliant.
When everybody else was competing with the same product for the 5-10%.
Right, okay.
And it worked very well.
Okay, so that was, so I know that you built up a small sort of portfolio in Canary Wharf, is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, so I built my buy-to-let portfolio. Bought the first one, it made about £500 a month after all costs, including the mortgage.
Okay, cool.
And I was living in one of the rooms.
Okay, right.
So logically, each other one should make me £1,000 a month.
Right, okay.
And that's what I did. I remortgaged it, bought the next one, bought the next one, bought the next one.
Okay.
Until I'd replaced my salary.
Oh, excellent, okay.
And then I quit the day job. Having replaced myself properly at work, I didn't leave them in the lurch.
Right, okay.
And the guy I brought in was probably much better than me anyway.
Right, okay.
And then I had spare time on my hands. I set up a little management business with a chap that used to work for me at the IT company. Okay. And started building portfolios for friends and family, private investors.
Brilliant.
Got to something, so I think when I set the management business up, I think I had 5 or 6 houses of my own. Okay. And then the management business, over the course of about 18 months, took me to about 30 or 40 houses under management.
Oh, okay, still nice.
Actually, that's not quite right. It was about 300 rooms in total.
Oh, right, okay. And what year are we looking at now? Because obviously...
So, 2002 first house, March 2002. Quit the day job in September 2003.
Okay, right.
And that's when I set the management business up. And then 2006,
right,
we agreed our first joint venture with bigger private equity investors.
Okay. So things are going nice, steady growth there.
Yeah.
Then I think a little thing called the credit crunch happened.
Well, we had our big growth spurt just before that.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Because we pitched for 2.5 million of equity.
Okay.
To acquire, refurbish, and extend, manage and maintain. A portfolio of these professional house shares.
Right.
The strategy really was to be the next step from student.
Okay.
But with a better
quality,
salaried
yeah.
Tenant base.
Okay, yeah, and better quality customer, okay.
And in areas of employment growth, of course, as well. Focused primarily around the Docklands.
Okay.
And I pitched to raise 2.5 million of equity. I ended up raising 38 million of equity.
Right, okay.
One of the lessons it's actually easier to raise more money than it is to raise less.
Okay.
Because a lot of professional investors, large-scale investors, they work on an assets under management basis.
What does that mean? So
they take fees on all the assets that they manage.
Okay.
So there aren't enough fees for them.
Right.
£2.5 million.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Portfolios.
Okay.
So they kind of need to get to 50, 100, £500 million.
Right. Okay.
In order to make money after paying quite high salaries for their team.
Okay. Right.
So we raised the 38 million of equity plus debt. We acquired, developed, let portfolio of about 180 million with that one joint venture partner.
Brilliant. Okay.
And then I sold a quarter of the operating company.
Okay.
So the management business, if you like, and brand.
Yeah.
For 7.5 million in 2007.
Okay. What was that? Was that still part of the Inspired, or was that still a different company?
No, this was pre-Inspired. This was Nice Group.
Okay, right. That's right. Okay.
With the primary brand being Nice Room.
Okay, right. Okay.
Pretty simple.
Yeah.
I think at the time we actually, because we built all our own web management systems for it.
Right.
I was still really a tech guy, not a real estate guy.
Okay, right.
I'm pretty sure we were above Spare Room in Google at the time.
Oh wow, okay, right.
Of course, Nice Room's not around anymore, unfortunately.
Okay.
But, Spare Room dominate those rankings now.
Right, okay.
And I use Spare Room even for letting one bed or two bed flats, not just rooms.
Brilliant, okay.
Because the Google rankings are so good.
That's right, yeah. So things are really going well. Did you have any kind of setback at all during the credit crunch at all?
Yeah, just a slight one.
That was always probably geared towards that.
Yeah, basically, when I sold shares to the hedge fund, that kind of coincided with the onset of the credit crunch.
Okay.
And my first joint venture partner was more a commercial real estate investor.
Okay.
And that got hit earlier.
Right.
So where I felt that we had a very good, solid, defensive, high yield strategy, and no major risk, because they were paying for everything. Unfortunately, they took a different approach to us.
Right.
And they just stopped paying us.
Okay.
And all the properties that we did in the joint venture with them were held offshore, with us not having any real control over them.
Right.
They controlled them, and we just had a management agreement and a profit share agreement.
Okay.
So when they stopped paying, but said they'd pay next week. Next week. Next week.
You could
I had all the employees and all the costs.
Yes. Yeah.
And I made the mistake of borrowing the money from the hedge fund, the second JV partners.
Right.
Okay. They invested in us.
Because you still had confidence that the first guy would still pay, you know.
Well, they said they'd be paying next week. Next week.
Yeah. Okay.
And we had a fairly large platform by then.
Okay.
We had 400 site workers,
wow.
35 office staff.
Right. Okay.
We were spending north of 1.2 million a month.
Right.
On build costs for all these houses that we were doing.
Oh, I see. Okay. Right.
So in 3 months, I borrowed £4.6 million.
Right.
Before I managed to get the first guys to start paying again.
Oh, I see. Okay. Eventually they did they? Right.
Well, they started trickling money in.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It was too
ultimately they didn't pay properly.
Right. Okay.
And we had borrowed the money to keep everything going.
Right.
So we were kind of screwed at that point.
Yeah. Right.
I battled it out for about another 18 months.
Okay.
But ultimately failed to rescue the business.
Right. Okay.
And lost everything in the process.
Right. Okay. So that's that can happen to anybody. So obviously you had a quite very meteoric rise. So you had a setback. There's a lot of people I've talked to that had a huge setbacks in the same kind of period. But really. But now, so what made you to get back into a property? So what do you think? Because obviously you got your fingers burned. So what made you look back at the property again?
Probably a little bit of anger.
Okay, right, okay.
And frankly, I didn't really know anything when I started.
Right, okay.
About real estate.
Okay.
Not a real estate family.
Yeah.
Not a real estate background.
Okay.
And we did so well with a nice group.
Excellent,
and it was such a fantastic experience up until the end.
Yeah.
I then did know quite a lot about real estate.
Yeah.
I think I'd had something like 2,500 tenants over that period of time.
Wow.
And I bought something like 500 properties.
Okay.
And we tested, tweaked, tuned everything.
Right,
I had that scale of platform to be able to do that.
Right, excellent.
So we tweaked the room sizes, the number of rooms,
right, okay.
the layouts. We analysed how people lived in the houses.
Okay.
Whether they shared the living rooms, whether they stayed in their rooms.
Right.
If we changed that, what happened.
Okay.
How long they stayed, what the maintenance costs were, what services we should plug in.
Okay.
So a lot of really practical experience.
Right. A lot of lessons learned there.
Yeah. So I didn't want to waste that.
Yeah.
Plus I didn't want it to be seen as just having been lucky the first time.
Right. Okay. You want to prove yourself again in the market.
I'm very stubborn.
Right. Okay. Okay. In a good way.
Usually in a good way.
Okay. Right.
Yeah. So I started again. My wife
Magdalena
supported that process. She didn't demand that I go out and get a job straight away.
Okay.
And it was really difficult the second time round.
Right.
I have to say it was much harder than the first time.
I suppose people that you were maybe dealing with knew of what happened, so maybe a bit more skeptical this time around, maybe.
Yeah, and I couldn't really borrow money from the traditional banking sources.
Right.
Because I had a bankruptcy on my track record.
Right. Okay, and it's very difficult. I think to become a director to get some loans.
You can be a director.
You can.
But it's just very difficult to get any loans from traditional sources.
Yeah. You have to be creative a bit.
Have to be creative. I was lucky in that the whole bridging industry was really just starting off.
Right.
And went through an exponential rate of growth.
Okay. What year was this?
It filled the gap where retail banks had contracted.
Oh right. What year was this one?
So this was 2009.
Okay. Right.
And I created Inspired really to do the same thing again, but maybe a bit smarter.
Right. Okay.
And with less overhead risk.
Okay.
I have a pretty big overhead now.
Right.
But we're doing twice as much business as we did with Nice Group.
Right. Okay.
And we have 5% of the staffing.
Oh, we see. Okay. Right. Oh wow. Okay. Yeah.
So we're I would say leaner and meaner.
So you outsource quite a few things.
Well, we're not meaner. We're not as naive as we were. We're still very nice.
Okay. Yeah. Very nice mean homes. Okay.
But we like to have. I now insist on having shares in the SPVs that own the assets.
Right. Okay.
So that we have more control.
Right. Okay. Definitely learned your lesson there. Then.
Yeah, and I like to have a more diverse investor base as well.
Okay.
So I won't do an exclusive joint venture.
Yeah.
Although our joint venture wasn't exclusive with the first guys.
Right.
They had first refusal in a particular area.
Right. Okay. So you de-risk it by getting maybe a number of parties together. So if one
if one falls down or doesn't perform,
I
can replace them.
Okay.
That's the aim anyway.
Right. Okay.
Nothing's ever quite that simple, but it seems to have worked so far.
Okay. So obviously you started Inspired and